Welcome. Today we'll be discussing interview elicitation techniques. My name is Mitchell Salyers and we also have Brianne Hansen with us. So today we'll be talking about three interview elicitation techniques, primarily structured interviews, unstructured interviews, and semi-structured interviews. The first type of interview that we are going to go over today is structured interviews. As a quick summary of why you would choose a structured interview over an unstructured interview is because you can have questions prepared before the interview has started, you can have a better control of the conversation during the interview, and you can interview multiple people at once. To have a successful structured interview with a stakeholder, there are three things that you need to keep in mind. First, knowing the right questions to ask. Second, when to ask those questions. And third, who to ask those questions of. When thinking about the right questions for a structured interview, remember TAP, topic, applicability, and perspective. Remember the topic that you're asking about, the applicability of the question to the person you're asking it to, and the perspective that they might have in answering the question. There are several pros to using structured interviews to collect requirements from stakeholders. Some of them are being able to gather specific information, being able to prepare beforehand questions that will be asked during the interview, being able to have control over the interview and the flow of it because you have dedicated questions that you're asking, as well as being able to repeat the interview with multiple people to confirm the reliability of the answers that you have gotten. But as in all things, there are also some cons that come with structured interviews, mainly that there are certain common concerns that could be overlooked if they are not asked in the questions. Being able to build the questions means familiarity with the domain of the project, and you cannot be able to collect large amounts of data very quickly because you have to interview every person. Using the structured interview technique, I interviewed three different stakeholders for our project. All of them were in their mid to late 30s, and the data is summarized in the next slide. The requirements that the stakeholders had for the app would be that they had suggestions for workouts, that there were illustrations for those workouts, that there was a place to set daily, weekly, and monthly goals, and that there could be potential options to follow workouts of famous people.
Next, we will discuss unstructured interviews. This type of interview is based on the conversational method between the interviewer and the stakeholder, with the goal to understand the user expectations and requirements for the software that is being designed. And it should also be based on a singular lived experience for the topic that is at hand. We've identified 5 steps for how to prepare for an interview. The first is a role play activity where team members take turns being the stakeholder and the interviewer. The second is corrective feedback learning, where an instructor provides interview feedback in an education setting. The third is to brainstorm questions with team members or coworkers. The fourth is to do a peer review and critique each other's practice interviews. And the fifth is to take an interview training course, for instance, from lynda.com. We've provided 5 items for how to conduct an interview. The first is the interview contract, which defines the objective of the interview and is confidentiality agreement between the interviewer and the stakeholder. Second, provide visual cues such as maps or photos. Third, procure and prepare recording equipment such as audio and video. Fourth, commence the interview by asking auditory, kinesthetic, emotional, and visual questions. And last, conclude the interview by thanking the stakeholder for their time. We've identified 4 pros for unstructured interviews. The first is that you can catch overlooked issues that may not have been discussed by previous stakeholders. The second is you can have an open-ended discussion between the interviewer and the stakeholder, giving you the option to delve deeper into a topic. The third is the stakeholder can offer suggestions for improvement that may not have been thought of by the analyst or other stakeholders. And the fourth is you can analyze the emotions of a stakeholder as they answer each of the questions and think through their responses. The cons for unstructured interviews are that interviewers often are not trained. Therefore, adequate answers may not be received. Also, there's a small number of people involved, unlike in questionnaires or surveys. The information is also subjective and hard to measure between interviews. Some topics may get neglected while others may have an extreme amount of detail involved. And last, they are difficult to repeat as there's no predefined set of questions. We've identified 4 recommendations for use of unstructured interviews. The first is it's great to gather initial background information if you don't know much about the system or process. Second, it's useful for gaining deep understanding if you do have some knowledge but need more. The third is it's a good way to isolate conflicts that would occur in a group setting. And the fourth, it's good for a complex topic where you would like to be able to ask a variety of questions. The data for our unstructured interviews comes from 2 female stakeholders, ages 12 and 17. The data has been summarized to their key requirements. Both stakeholders currently use fitness trackers. The first likes to use the alarm system for waking up in the morning. The second likes to use the timer for homework and exercise. Both like to use the sleep tracker to see how many hours they slept at night. The first likes the calming feature to use before tests and stressful events. And the third likes to use the steps to race against other people and do challenges. There were 5 requirements requested by the stakeholders. The first was an option to customize entered exercises versus using a small predefined list. The second was to add a drop-down list for ease of typing to add exercises. Third, both requested reminders to drink water, and one stakeholder requested a widget on the homepage instead of going into the app. Fourth, the second stakeholder requested a game to earn points with her steps. And last, the second stakeholder requested a calendar for daily health reminders such as eating meals on time and taking medications.
The last type of interviews that we will be discussing today is semi-structured interviews. Semi-structured interviews combine the best of both structured interviews and unstructured interviews by allowing questions for consistency and allowing open-ended discussion for sharing of new ideas. Though semi-structured interviews take the best from both structured and unstructured interviews, there are still some downsides, mainly that of it being time-consuming and expensive, as well as the interviewer may lose focus during the interview because of the open-ended discussion.
The data for our semi-structured interviews involved 2 adult women stakeholders, and again, the data has been summarized to key requirements. The first stakeholder said that she uses her device for a sleep tracker. She would use it more if she had customized exercises. The second stakeholder uses her device for a sleep tracker to see how many hours she slept, as well as a step counter to reach her 10,000 step goal. She also uses the floor counter to know how many levels she has climbed, and the weight tracker to keep an eye on weight trends. The requirements the stakeholders requested were a calorie counter to be utilized during exercises and also the ability to add custom exercises beyond a predefined list. The second also requested custom daily, weekly, and monthly goals with an option for sub-goals for each. The first requested a reminder to drink water and again a widget as the 12-year-old requested. The first one also suggested a heart rate tracker with the alarm ability if the heart rate is too high or too low, and also an oxygen tracker with alarm ability if the oxygen levels are too low. We have prepared 6 test questions about interviews.
The first test question that we have is, a structured interview will be successful when asking lots of questions. True or false? The correct answer is false. The success of structured interviews depends on knowing what are the right questions to ask, when should they be asked, and who should answer them.
The second question is, what are 5 ways to prepare for interviews? The answers are role play activity, corrective feedback learning, brainstorm questions, peer review, and take an interview training course.
The third question that we have for the test is, pick 3 pros of structured interviews. The correct answers are, interviewer has more control over the interview, Interview can be repeated to check for reliability, and questions can be prepared beforehand.
Question number 4 is, what are the 3 cons of conducting interviews for elicitation requirements? The answers are time-consuming, small number of people involved, and findings are subjective.
The 5th question that we have for the test is, what does TAP stand for? Multiple choice. The correct answer is topic, applicability, and perspective.
Question number 6 is, please match the term to each definition of an interview type. The answers are structured, formal, and contain a set of predefined questions prepared and asked to the stakeholder. The second is semi-structured. Interview is a combination of predefined and unplanned questions asked to the stakeholder. The third is unstructured, informal, and contains unplanned questions asked to the stakeholder.
And here are the references that we used for our presentation.